Okay.
Thanks.
Joseph, please.
Okay. Kia ora, I'm Joseph, I'm 21 years old, and I move often to stay ahead of student flats, but I could potentially be living in the city for another 60 years or more, and I'd actually be quite keen on having a future in Ōtautahi Christchurch. But it's not a nice to have for that future to include a functioning city council and functioning infrastructure. It's a must have, and it's pretty unnerving to me that the long-term plan undermines that. And I don't want to be worrying about the city's future. I want to focus on uni, where I'm studying linguistics, history, and law. And I want to spend my free time on poetry instead of 500-page long-term plans and associated documents. Therefore, I shall declaim to you part of my favourite poem, Percy Shelley's Mask of Anarchy. I met murder on the way. He had a mask like Castlereagh. Very smooth he looked yet grim. 7 bloodhounds followed him. All were fat, and well they might be in admirable plight, for 1 by 1, and 2 by 2 he tossed the human hearts to chew, which from his wide cloak he drew. Next came Fraud, and he had on, like Eldon, an ermine gown. His big tears, for he wept well, turned to millstones as they fell. And the little children who round his feet played to and fro, thinking every tear a gem, had their brains knocked out by them. Clothed with Bible, as with light, and the shadows of the night, like Sidmouth next, hypocrisy, on a crocodile rode by, and many more destructions played in this ghastly masquerade, all disguised even to the eyes, like bishops, lawyers, peers, and spies. In the long-term plan, sit many more destructions playing, and indeed ghastly masquerading. From the stormwater activity plan, asset management improvements are not likely to be carried out unless at the expense of other existing tasks. There will not be any programs for improving our understanding on waterway contamination, nor infrastructure planning for climate change. The report also names 4 climate programs that the plan refuses to fund. I'm worried that Council would make a plan that fails to account for flooding and the climate crisis. It's setting up the city to see that ghastly masquerade of destructions, and it is disguised before me now as councillors, lawyers, peers, and mayors. So I turn now to the rates rise and, of course, hypocrisy. The rates rise is too low. Council needs to expand, not reduce, levels of service in all fields, and stormwater is a microcosm, but it's true for everything that Council is doing, that you should do more, not less, and that rates are the only fair way to fund that, because anything else absolves the generation that caused the shortfall and puts the cost onto mine and future generations. Including this year's 13-ish, the average rates rise per annum since 2013 has been 6%-ish, barely keeping pace with inflation. To build a vibrant, climate-resilient city for future generations, the rates are just going to have to go up. Anything else is fantasy. To quote the Transport Activity Plan, significant cost escalation over recent years means that the actual quantum of work which the agreed funding level enables us to carry out is reducing. As a result, the backlog is increasing, with an ever-growing proportion of total work being reactive. Don't saddle the city with millstones of debt to knock out the brains of children of Christchurch. To refuse to raise rates is an ermine-clad fraud. And finally, I turn to climate. All climate policies need more funds. The city should be flooded with cycleways, not stormwater. They're cheaper to build and maintain than roads for cars, and get people around without emitting black smoke. And since I use them every day, I know that cycleways make cyclists safe. On cycleways, I hear no bloodhounds baying from Ford Rangers to chew my heart. To refuse to provide safe and equitable road access for everyone, not just drivers, is to wear a mask like Castlereagh. I apologise for the lack of detail in my submission. I've only this slot to speak for myself, so I've had to take a broad scope on the hundreds upon hundreds of pages of long-term plan documents that I've read. My final remarks would be that every major cycle route must be completed within the long-term plan cycle by 27. Council needs to get serious on climate, and in future, plans must be more accessible than 500 pages plus supporting docs. I know, for example, that some people said in their submissions that they support mine because I am one of the only people stubborn enough to go beyond deeply unsatisfactory and unrepresentative consultation documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to carry on with part 2?
Yes, I'll continue now to use the Climate Action Club.
Thank you.
Right, so I'm now speaking as Secretary of UC Climate Action Club, a UCSA-affiliated campus club with members in all schools of the uni, and here with me is our Treasurer Quinn, completing his Bachelor of Engineering with honours in Civil Engineering. Our club has a broad range of interests and expertise, and we put that to use when we analyse documents such as the long-term plan. Two members of our research team, myself and another, spent 30-ish hours each on long-term plan docs. Quinn and a graduate water engineer spent 4 hours each. Other members of the research team spent various hours on the document, and what we found was that the documents were overlong, overcomplex, and still failed to provide enough detail to be understood.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Quinn. I'm a fourth year civil engineering student, and outside of uni, I'm also a volunteer firefighter who went to the Port Hills this year. I'm speaking for UC Climate Action Club, so I'd like to speak personally as a volunteer firefighter and a natural resources engineering student. The spread of the fire this year was unnecessary and the result of irresponsible choices. All land use in the city is because of choices that CCC makes for zoning. Of course the Port Hills are going to burn. It's a climate crisis and pine monoculture burns fast. CCC made irresponsible calls on the Port Hills, which it can fix by keeping it red zoned and replanting with natives, not pines, and working with mana whenua. All of the long-term plan is this irresponsible. CCC needs to start taking real action on the climate crisis. If it doesn't, things will only get worse. I've worked in stormwater management, and it's beyond obvious that Ōtautahi is unprepared for floods and needs to start spending on flood protection now. It is not good enough that the spending is scheduled for 3 or 7 or however many years out. Money needs to be spent on climate mitigation and adaptation now, and the rates need to rise to fund it.
UC Climate Action Club is asking you to take your responsibilities seriously. Council's not just for today's ratepayers, it's for all residents, current and future. You're not just here to serve the now, you're here to protect and build up the city for future generations. Council can't hide from the responsibility to stop polluting, whether that's directly or by facilitating pollution through car dependency and low-density development. Every major cycle route must be finished within the long-term plan cycle with local connections, and MDRS must be implemented citywide with high-density and central, no exceptions. Money has to be set aside for mass rapid transit, and every road more than 2 lanes wide should have a bus or bike lane right now. You also have a responsibility to protect current and future residents. The rivers are already flooding, so it's time to take the problem seriously. Heathcote floodplain management should be funded ASAP, and Ōtakaroko governance should be funded and established ASAP too. It's a fact that the weather's getting more and more unpredictable and delivering more and more climate-influenced disasters, so CCC has to be ready. Council's zoned for housing where there's sea level rise and climate disasters, so now it's responsible for those that it encouraged to be vulnerable by living there. Managed retreat must start now. And it's not good enough that the long-term plan requires research teams to read, and that Council didn't proactively engage high school and university communities. High schoolers had to come to you at school strike, you'll remember that, Mr. Nair, and uni clubs had to proactively seek engagement sessions on campus. And worse, the language used in the long-term plan was alienating and sometimes even hostile. In one example, Council explains that a, quote, mitigation for climate change, for sea level rise threatening homes, is that, quote, Council is not responsible for climate change, which is true only in the most obtuse reading of the words. Going forward, Council has to take engagement and the climate crisis seriously. Young people deserve better, and we expect to see Council at UC's campus and high schools for all future consultations, because your responsibilities include making sure that the voting and future voting population are kept informed about their own city. Thank you.
Well, good. Kelly, please.
Gentlemen, thank you for your very passionate presentation. When you're raising a child, we try to focus on the positive things that children do. We praise the behaviours we want to see. Is there anything that you think that we're doing positively that pleases you?
Well, all existing funds in the climate sphere for cycleways, for biodiversity, for public transport, it's good to be funding those. And while the funding is insufficient and not enough, it's certainly a start and should go up.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah?
Thanks so much for that. So this probably crosses both of those submissions, but when it comes to the consultation document for the next, I guess, annual plan and long-term plan, do you believe that we should be saying not only how much money we are spending, but what that money will actually get us? So how much work will be done and how that compares to previous or to what is needed?
Yes, I think that would be very helpful. Other issues include the overly bureaucratic language used, which, as I understand it, there is a plain language unit at council which could be engaged for stuff like this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Spot on timing. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, Carly, please.